I did not like The Legend of Zelda The Wind. Hey, do not touch that button! I see you. Where was I? Oh yes, I did not like The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker for the majority of my life. The game didn't simply click or resonate with me like so many others. So many of my friends had The Wind Waker at the top of their tier list, saying a bunch of crazy stuff like how it's the best Zelda game ever made and how it's crazy I've never beaten it before. I'm a huge Zelda fan, so I had planned on beating it sometime in my life, but every time I tried to get into it, I could never make it past the Forbidden Woods before I would just put it down for years and years on end. Now, I didn't think the game was bad by any means, but it was definitely missing something. The thing that hooks me to all other Zelda games. The thing that keeps me playing for hours and hours. Well, what is that thing, you ask? I don't know, some dumb game magic or something, I really couldn't tell you what it is. But all of that changed when I decided to replay The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, a game that I had played and beaten as a kid, but never went back to beyond the one time, for I had remembered almost nothing about what went on in that game outside of the beginning and ending. I adored every single second of that playthrough and fell in love with the game after playing it for what felt like the first time all over again. After loving Ocarina of Time, I had a thought pop up in my brain that I should replay every single 3D Zelda game so I can have a proper, up-to-date opinion on all of them, especially since I've never beaten games like Twilight Princess and the subject of today's video, The Wind Waker. Everything past the beginning of the Forbidden Woods dungeon was new territory to me, so I was super excited to get into the game. However, I was met with a ton of problems early on that almost killed my playthrough and almost made it my least favorite 3D Zelda. However, once again, I managed to buckle down and beat the game and was greeted with one of the best gaming experiences of all time. Hey everybody, my name is Dylonic, and this is my story on how I grew to love The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. We'll be going through the majority of my adventure and how I grew to appreciate this game for everything it tried to do, despite it not being my ideal Zelda. Although I am curious, why do you love or hate The Wind Waker? Let me know down in the comments below. But without further ado, let's get into the video. We're just gonna dive right into my first impressions of the game, as even on the Wii U, this game looks absolutely incredible. By the way, I am indeed playing the HD version on the game on original hardware on my Wii U, and no, I didn't crack my Wii U to play this game because the prices for both the original and the remaster are too high. Don't say such silly things. But seriously, first impressions alone, I think this game looks fantastic. My friends weren't kidding when they say the graphics are timeless. The only Zelda game I think looks better from an artistic standpoint is in Skyward Sword. I believe it to be a natural evolution of this style. At times, I think the game can be too bright, but that's just because of the remaster and its added bloom, but still. It's really shocking to think that the next Zelda game to come out after this would be the game that ages the worst in terms of graphics besides the 64 games. Like, yeah, I have nostalgia bias towards Twilight Princess since it was my first ever Zelda game, but even on the Wii U, it's very fuzzy and muddy looking at times, which doesn't help its case at all. Wind Waker simply has a perfect art style. I am a Zelda fan that prefers the more adult, serious style than I do the cartoony one, because that's just who I am. I love getting invested in a good story, and having it look good too is always a plus. That's why I think Skyward Sword will never be topped in terms of art style, as in my opinion, it has the perfect blend of cartoony charm that Wind Waker has, while also looking realistic enough to where I can easily invest myself in the world and its characters. That doesn't take anything away from Wind Waker, however, as it still looks fantastic. The main takeaway is that going all in on the cartoon stuff just isn't my personal cup of tea, but I don't think it takes away from the overall experience of the game. Just because it's not realistic doesn't mean I can't get invested into the world. It just means it's going to be a lot harder to do since the person you talk to most in this game is a talking boat. Although this game runs far worse than I had expected it to, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes this game will run at 60 frames per second, and it looks lovely because of it, but God forbid anything happens on screen other than Link swinging his sword with nothing around, because there's a great chance the frames will dip because of it. Like, there was a cool boss with cool colors, but every time I hit him, the game just tanks in frame rate, and it kinda killed it for me. Well, I mean, I killed the boss, but like, it killed all excitement. You know what, let's move on. I don't know if it's because of the added bloom or what, but you would think a remastered GameCube game on much more powerful hardware would have no issues running well. I mean, Skyward Sword for the Switch has no issues like this. I don't know, it's a minor gripe all things considered, but I feel it worth bringing up now before I get way too deep into it. With the beginning of Wind Waker, I am very familiar with what I need to do and how it's structured. Zelda games are known for their abysmal pacing, and when it comes to the start of their games, I think Wind Waker is no different when it comes to starting your adventure. It's paced slightly better than Skyward Sword and especially Twilight Princess, but that's mainly because you're hopping around from location to location before you reach the first dungeon in the game, Dragon Roost Cavern. I'm aware I'm probably gonna get flack for saying this since the Forsaken Fortress exists, but its purpose exists more as a story moment than a dungeon. There's no real puzzles here, or a boss for that matter. You just need to sneak around to the top and hope that it doesn't take you longer than it should, because in my case, it took me much longer than I should have, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about the Forsaken Fortress a little bit later because I completely skipped over the actual intro of the game, being this long-winded text cutscene and Link's sister being taken away. Something I completely forgot about was that this game is a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, and as I established earlier, Ocarina of Time quickly became one of my favorite games of all time, and this is the Zelda game that is most fresh in my mind. So if I compared this game to Ocarina of Time a lot, just know it's because of those reasons, being it's fresh in my mind and I believe it to be upwards of the peak of Zelda in terms of dungeon design and story. Oh, and Wind Waker just being a straight up sequel is also a reason. This game's got big shoes to fill. I like that they try to establish the fact that Link has a family to go home to and he just isn't some random orphan found on the streets by a big tree. This guy has a family and a village who cares about him, so seeing his sister get captured, forcing him to embark on this quest is pretty compelling and I like it a lot. It gives me a reason to care about Link as a character other than him being the hero and he does really cool stuff. As I said earlier with the art style junk, it's gonna be a lot harder to get me invested into Link as a character and the world he inhabits, but I think this beginning section does a good enough job. The intro on its own is pretty good, but I count the intro to be much more than just the Outset Islet portion of the game, as we have both the Forsaken Fortress and Windfall Island to go through before we can actually embark on a real adventure. I really don't like the Forsaken Fortress at all, and as I said earlier, it's not a dungeon. No matter what you say, it will never be one, not only in my eyes, but just in general. I can't take you seriously if you think it's a dungeon. That's like saying breaking out of the prison as a wolf at the beginning of Twilight Princess is a dungeon, which is obviously false, right? Like, I can't be alone in this. Then again, I'm not too involved in the Zelda community, so I'm not very well versed in who considers what. What makes a Zelda dungeon a Zelda dungeon to me is not only the structure of the place, but it also must involve puzzles, a boss, and a heart piece at the end of the dungeon. Sure, you can throw in a mini boss with a dungeon item, but the constant in every single Zelda game, including Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, are those things. Despite getting a dungeon map in this area, this place is not a dungeon by the very constants of what makes a dungeon in Zelda. Fight me. I'm also not a huge fan of just not being able to fight things in this area. You have to sneak around and hope to not be caught and pray to God you don't, because if you do, it's back to the start of the area for you. This place, to me, serves no purpose other than to establish Ganondorf as the antagonist in this game, because the second you get to the top of the area, you're whisked away to Windfall Island. The only progress you make in this area is getting your sword back and seeing Ganondorf. There's absolutely nothing to this area, and it makes me despise it all the more. This next section also makes me cringe a little bit, but that's probably because I forgot what to do and fumbled around for a long time while learning about what to do through a guide. I realized I already did what I was supposed to do a while ago. That's not really an issue of the game, that's my bad since I wasn't really paying attention, so I won't talk any points. This section, once you know what you're doing, is far shorter than the time I spent there, so maybe on repeat playthroughs this section will be a lot better, but what can you do, I guess. I like Windfall Island, but outside of Outset Island, this is like the only village in the entire game and is your central hub for shops and whatnot. This place during the beginning was a pain in the butt to get to, as it's quite the distance from Dragon Roost Island, and sailing is just simply not fun, and I kinda just let the game play itself for a while as we sailed across the map. Dragon Roost Island, however, is where things go from on the fence to pretty good. From the few times I attempted to play this game, Dragon Roost Island was always the highlight because mainly it's where we actually start our quest here, for real this time. You go to the island, talk to this sick new tribe of people, the Rito, and trek through the Dragon Roost Cavern. This dungeon is pretty sick, I won't lie. To those who have played the game, I think we all know that this game is pretty easy, but regardless of the lack of difficulty, I think the design of this dungeon was pretty sick. Although something stuck out to me that was very different from other games, especially Ocarina of Time, which I'll talk about in more detail as we go further into the dungeons, but I definitely wasn't expecting a fire-themed dungeon as the first dungeon in a Zelda game. Oftentimes, almost all the time, it takes place in a forest-themed temple, but I kinda like the change of pace. It offers something new without feeling forced. I mean, a fire-based temple is nothing new. Those are always the second dungeons in every other Zelda game, but what I mean to say is that it helps the dungeon stand out from every other Zelda game. These games have formulas, so seeing it get broken in simple ways like this is pretty cool, just like how a lot of Mario games start with the grass world, then the desert one, so on and so forth, and then you get to Mario Wonder and expect the worlds to remain the same as is tradition, but see that it doesn't. The second world is this sick ice and cloud theme world. I don't know, the crux of what I'm trying to say here is that this is really cool. The boss for the dungeon, however, Jesus Christ, they might as well not even make a boss for this dungeon, which sucks to say because I love this guy's design. He's really cool looking, but the boss is mind-numbingly easy and is honestly one of my least favorite Zelda bosses of all time. You want to know how to beat this guy? You really want to know how to beat this guy? You use the grappling hook to swing to the other side. That's it. Oh, and once the armor is off, you kind of swing your sword for a bit until he dies. This boss is so easy it put me to sleep. Ignore the fact that there's footage of me dying to this boss on screen right now, as I had like half a heart. Shut up, please. I don't know, it left a very sour taste in my mouth after beating the dungeon. My friend said the game was easy, but I wasn't thinking this easy. This is Mario boss levels of difficulty, which is saying something because Zelda bosses never take 30 seconds to defeat. It's astounding. And even after, the fun is cut off real quick because right after, you have to sail all the way across the map to the next dungeon, being the Forest Haven. Now, let me be clear. I thought the stuff on the ground was awesome. I have no problem with it. It was very fun finally getting into the action after what felt like forever. It's just that I think the sailing in this game is absolute garbage. I simply don't like it. This is the main selling point of this game, and oh god, I freaking hate it. You move at an absolute crawl, and changing the wind really only means you can go relatively quickly in one direction. God forbid you miss an item on the way, because trying to move against the wind is a death wish. Okay, that's quite the exaggeration, but still, sailing only feels alright when you're going from the island you were at to the next one you were supposed to go to, because it simply doesn't feel good. I was told by a friend to constantly explore and chart everywhere I go, because it'll bite me later and I just don't feel compelled to do so because I just don't want to explore. I know about the Triforce quest in the future, so I know I have to chart everywhere I go, but for a long while, it was only on the way to my destination because I simply hated being on the water. In a Zelda game, I should be excited to go out and explore, alright? To spread my wings and look for every nook and cranny possible to see what's out in this vast world. In Ocarina of Time, I had those exact feelings. I wanted to know what was out there, what was waiting for me. In Wind Waker, I don't know, it just didn't click with me in the slightest. And as I said again, I was on autopilot going from island to island here. It doesn't help that you get the bow and bombs towards inside of the third dungeon, so it took me well over 5+ hours to really have any way to get on islands I saw previously. The game also not having fast travel is also really stupid, and it just kills all momentum the game had when exploring. Never mind, I take back what I said, all is well in the world. Imagine my absolute excitement when I learned that not only you can fast travel, but there's also a sail exclusive to the remaster that makes you go much faster and negates the need to keep changing the wind direction. Hear my words when I say that this is an absolute game changer. My friend was in call with me after telling him my gripes with the game, and he told me that I needed to head to Windfall Island because the auctions are held every night and there's an item I desperately need there. He wanted it to be a surprise, but I'm not kidding when I say I found a fish that told me about it literally 10 seconds later. Honestly, if it was just fast travel, I would have liked exploration a lot more, as I wouldn't need to travel all the way across the map just to fill up a bottle. But now with the Swift Sail, I can confidently say that this actually makes exploring the Great Sea a fantastic time. Sure, it still takes a while to get to places, but the speed difference is immeasurable and makes adventuring more fun knowing you're speeding through the Great Sea. Having this item made me want to go out and explore every single island, knowing it doesn't take like 12 years to get there, and it was a blast. After getting the Swift Sail, I just spent the next hour and a half exploring the Great Sea, completely ignoring the fact that I needed to save my sister from Ganondorf. She'll be fine, I think. This alone bumped the game up a ton for me, as it did wonders for my enjoyment. I found myself rarely even using fast travel because the Swift Sail just felt so good to use. Learning about and obtaining these items absolutely made my playthrough so much better, and it also helped that I got invested in the story right before I obtained these items. I was very much dreading the future of this game, knowing that I needed to go out and explore darn near every single island to be sure I not only get all of the items, but all of the Triforce pieces as well, since what appears to be optional islands are actually required for beating the game. Places like the Fire and Ice Island, which need the elemental arrows to access so you can get the power bracelets and the iron boots. Power bracelets having a lot of uses, especially for the Triforce quest on Outside Island with a large gauntlet of enemies. I didn't hate the Triforce quest as much as I thought I would. It's not my ideal quest, especially if you wait until the end of the game to get all the pieces, which thank God I didn't because I'd be a lot worse for it. I really made sure to spread them out over the Earth and Wind Temple and had a much more fun time collecting them, as they felt more optional than they actually were. I mean, this game does encourage you to collect them after the second round with the Forsaken Fortress, so if you wait until the last minute to complete the quest, that's kinda your fault. Even so, I just found myself getting lost in this world, trying to find everything I can while doing the mandatory stuff along the way. I liked the Earth and Wind Temple, sure, but almost had more fun going out on this large treasure hunt for the Triforce. Speaking of, the dungeon design in this game is far different from previous Zelda games and even Zelda games to precede it. The structure is a lot more linear in these other games, rarely even having a hub room of any kind, and if it does, it's very small unless you're the Wind Temple. I do really like this approach, however. I prefer the dungeons of Ocarina of Time, but the dungeons from Wind Waker are very consistent, and I don't think that there was a single bad dungeon in the entire game. I'll make a ranking video eventually to continue that series, so if you want to watch my Ocarina of Time dungeon ranking, the link will be in the description, but I'll give some spoilers right now, saying that there wasn't a bad dungeon at all. The Water Temple from Ocarina of Time, I absolutely dread. There isn't a single dungeon like that here, and honestly, I think the Earth Temple does the mirror puzzles a lot better than the Spirit Temple in Ocarina of Time. Well, I mean, that should be par for the course. It's a sequel, but I still think it's worth mentioning. Some of the bosses are pretty good as well, but as I stated earlier, they're so easy it's not even funny. They all have easy to predict formulas, but I do think the later dungeons, they do get a lot better, but that's not saying much considering how low of a bar it actually is. Dragon Roost was so easy, I didn't like it. The Forbidden Woods boss was a bit better, it was still so easy. The Tower of the Gods boss was actually great, I really liked that one. They ranged from mid to good, but the bosses aren't what makes a good dungeon, so it's really no skin off my back. Not something I'm complaining about too much. Something I want to touch on briefly before I get into my thoughts on the story and the characters of the game is a common complaint that I've seen thrown around a lot as I've been playing the game, that being the game artificially extends its length, I believe. That the game goes out of its way to throw things in your way just to simply pad out the runtime, and I can see why people would think this, as the Triforce quest has you running all across the overworld for these collectibles and whatnot. A lot of Nintendo games on the GameCube specifically seem to have this issue, the most notable being Metroid Prime and the backtracking you need to do at the end of the game, but honestly, I can't agree with the common consensus here. I think the game is a great length and believe that the padding to be rather non-existent. I mean, sure, I can see why people feel this way, especially if they were to simply grind out the story quest to get it done as quickly as possible. And you know what? That's completely fine. If you want to do nothing but the story, go right ahead. But I don't see Wind Waker as the ideal game for that. Zelda games through and through are an adventure from start to finish. In every game, you're encouraged to go out and explore, look for everything the world has for you, and I think the Wind Waker does an amazing job at encouraging you to do so. Side content in Zelda games are great time killers and sometimes integral parts of the game. The game doesn't artificially pad its runtime. I think people are just trying to get through the game rather quickly. You're meant to take it slower. Enjoy your time and explore. Fight things. Go to a village. Stumble upon a ghost ship. Making discoveries are what makes Zelda games so good. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom would be nothing without this, as exploration is the very thing Zelda was founded upon. As long as you take your time and not rush things, the game goes by pretty smoothly. I had absolutely no issues with padding. When I hear padding or artificially extending runtime, I think of games like Sonic Frontiers or Sonic Unleashed. As a Sonic fan myself, I am no stranger to padding, unfortunately. The entire final island of Sonic Frontiers is padding and I hate it. So when I see a game like Wind Waker, I just don't see any real padding because I naturally came upon most things by taking my time and exploring, so I just didn't feel any of that extensions like what people are saying. But I don't know, I could be completely wrong. As I stated before, I'm not too involved in the Zelda community, so if I am missing something, let me know down in the comments below. Sorry for that rant, let's continue. If I thought that Skyward Sword was the peak of Zelda stories, then Wind Waker really gave Skyward Sword a run for its money because it is right up there as one of the best Zelda stories. They really wanted to go all in on the Ocarina of Time sequel angle, and I just fell in love with it. The moment we got sent back to the Forsaken Fortress for round 2 was when things really kicked up. As per tradition in Zelda games, when you complete the first 3 dungeons, you get access to the Master Sword, and this game is no different. But the story implications go absolutely insane as you actually return to the previous land of Hyrule before it was flooded, the exact same land of Hyrule from Ocarina of Time. We didn't actually get to see the inside of Hyrule Castle from Ocarina of Time, and it's very clear things have changed since Link defeated Ganon in the original game, for there's a statue of him hiding the Master Sword. With Zelda games, references to past games are inevitable, but this game goes one step further and just straight up shows us characters from the past games. The original sages of Ocarina of Time are on stained glass in the room where you obtain the Master Sword, which is just so cool! Love it a ton. I was expecting a few mentions of Ocarina of Time, but even going as far to straight up name drop the Hero of Time is just nuts to me. No Zelda game ever goes this far again to connect itself to previous games other than a few cryptic hints or mentions that fans can smile and point to. It also helps that Ganondorf is just straight up the same guy from Ocarina of Time, as his seal broke, so he's back at it again for the Triforce. This time though, he actually has a character other than just evil for the sake of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love evil Ganondorf. My favorite version of the character is from Tears of the Kingdom, and bro's just evil because he wants to be, and I love that. However, giving Ganondorf a legit motivation out of jealousy for the prosperous land of Hyrule is really just a really good reason. Like, I get it. I was rooting for him, man. He deserved the Triforce. Outside of Tears of the Kingdom, this Ganondorf is easily the best iteration of the character, bar none. I also think the same goes for the main character, Link. This being the most outlandish version of the character, as every single version of Link is without a shadow of a doubt the destined hero of legend. Someone destined to draw the Master Sword, slay the evil Ganondorf, and bring peace to Hyrule and the world. But this game is about breaking tradition, so how about we just don't make the Link the hero in this game? Look, MatPat was right when the Hero of Winds was on Fraud Watch, but I think he pulls through as the end, as he wasn't destined to be the hero. He just went out and made himself one, and then decided to drive his sword through Ganondorf's skull, saving that would eventually become the new world. In terms of how awesome Links are, I'd put Wind Waker Link in my top 3 for forging his own destiny alone. I mean, yeah, Ocarina of Time Link is the chosen hero, yeah, Skyward Sword Link is also the chosen hero. Wind Waker Link, he's just some bum on an island, and I love that about him. Bro just wanted to save his sister and managed to get roped into this much larger adventure, eventually finding the Triforce and making himself the hero the world needed. His story isn't too deep or anything, but it really is something cool, as we never see anything like this again in the franchise, the closest being Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Link, as they pretty much all but deleted the Triforce in that game, since not even Ganondorf nor Link have been shown to wear the Triforce of Courage and Power respectively, but that's obviously a video for another day. The weakest character, however, is Zelda, being that she starts really strong as Tetra in the early game. I think she's a very fun character, and then she's revealed to be Zelda and does literally nothing for the rest of the game. And they whitewashed her. Seriously, why did they do that? She's just a nothing burger of a character post-reveal. She barely even showed up or did anything before she was revealed to be Zelda, but at least she was cool in her pirate attire. I don't know, she just doesn't jive with me. It doesn't feel the same, especially since she goes back to being Tetra right as the game ends. She could have just been name dropped as Zelda and shown the Triforce of Wisdom. That would have been good enough for me. But no, they just had to go and change her skin color. Why, come on, Nintendo, why did you make Zelda a boring white girl who likes Takis and Taylor Swift? Why did you do that, Nintendo? What's your agenda? When it comes to 3D Zelda games, at a minimum, they're a 9 out of 10. Each game, by the time the credits roll, make me feel amazing, remembering the amazing adventure I just embarked on and wanting to immediately go on another. At its core, the Legend of Zelda series is about adventure. Strip away the story, the action, and the dungeons, and what you have left will be nothing but adventure. The overworld, the drive to go out on an unforgettable adventure. I think Wind Waker captures that feeling almost perfectly. While the start of Wind Waker was quite rocky, making me feel uneasy about the game's quality, by the end of it, I was absolutely enthralled by the charming characters, the amazing story, and most of all, its world. This game managed to do the impossible, and managed to pull me back in as I was slipping away and made sure to never let go. The dungeons, the puzzles, the soundtracks, everything just clicked with me. The game took me about 20 hours to beat, and I do not regret a single second of it. Now this makes me want the port of this game to Switch all the more, as I'm even more eager to jump back into the world of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Hey everybody, my name is Dylonic, and that was my first impression / review for The Wind Waker. If you liked what you saw, I highly suggest hitting my friend subscribe. He really likes getting hit, and if you want to go ahead and push his buttons for me, that would be greatly appreciated. I got a lot of big plans for this channel coming up, so I would love to see you all there, and hey, if you want to have a bigger discussion, make sure to check out the description for my Discord server I made with my fellow Nintendo tuber CK Matt. We would also love to see you all there, but that's gonna do it for me today. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Stay fresh, everybody.